Hello and welcome to the Collecting Heroes podcast. I'm your host JD, the collector of collectors, and today is a special day for me because I, as you know, for anyone who's been listening to the podcast, am a Batman collector. And I've gotten to, nerd out and geek out with people all around the world so far for different fandoms. And the one thing I keep mentioning is that I'm a Batman collector. So eventually it was going to happen that I was going to have someone who's a fellow Bat family member. So could you please welcome my next guest, Brian Malone, to the podcast. Brian, thank you for joining me. How are you doing today?
Great. I'm doing great. Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
So you're from Virginia, from the US. I get a lot of collectors from the US. Obviously, quite a big country with a lot of things, and you're in the perfect place to come across a lot of Batman merchandise. I'm looking at you right now, and for people listening, he's got really great setup in the background with a lot of different Batman pieces, including Adam West, but he's also got Michael Keaton picture there. So there's a bit of a mix I can see, which is great. Obviously an all-around Batman fan. Tell me though, how did you get into Batman? We always try and start from the start. Where did this love come from? Where did this obsession start?
It's funny. I always wondered this because, as long as I can remember, I've always loved Batman. And the cynic in me almost wonders if I was brainwashed, if I had no choice, because I was born in 1988, and of course Batmania was going in full swing, going into the first Keaton movie.
Yes.
So Batman was obviously everywhere. I remember growing up watching the reruns of the Adam West show. And obviously as I grew up, I ended up loving the Keaton movies. I originally owned the Batman Returns on VHS, which I still have. Since when I was a kid, and I just grew up on it. Everything I saw Batman, I just loved, and so yeah, it kind of sprung from there.
Excellent. So you, much like myself, actually, it's a very similar story. I'm a bit older than you. I was actually old enough to go and see it in the cinemas, the 1989 Tim Burton Batman. So Michael Keaton is, for me, my favorite Batman from a nostalgia point of view. I wouldn't rate him as the best Batman in all of the movies, but definitely my favorite. So very similar, and also used to come home from school and watch the Adam West Batman as well, which exactly the same trajectory, just a few years apart. And you mentioned about having the VHS though. So is that the first item you would say that you have in your collection, or the oldest item in your collection?
I think that might be the oldest item that I still have. I have kids shirts of Batman Forever that I used to wear, or I think even have I remember I had a satin Batman jacket from maybe when I was five-ish. It's definitely early 90s. I almost want to say 92, 91, maybe right before they switched over to Batman Returns. But I still have a lot of those little things that I just never sold or never got rid of.
That's awesome. It's probably a bit hard to fit now. Is it something that you would hope to maybe hand down one day to maybe a child or a younger family member, or is it something that you cherish in your collection for yourself?
That's the one thing about collecting. At some points, you kind of have to ask yourself, to what end? What are we doing ultimately? You know what I mean? Do we pass this down? We want obviously, I don't have any kids, so and all my cousins are a little bit older, or nieces and nephews. So I don't know. I think it's just something I'm just going to hold on to, and then when the moment is right, I'll know what to do with it. I hope.
Fair enough. I mean, look, I have pieces, and I don't have children either. I keep telling people, I'm not having children because I don't want them to go into the Batcave and play with my toys and break any of my Lego and things like that. I always joke with people about that. But obviously, if that's something that happens down the track, perfect. You can pass on that nostalgia to someone else. For you growing up as a Batman fan, as a child, as you said, you may have gotten a little brainwashed by all the marketing and things like that. Is there a movie in particular that sticks out for you? Because you obviously would have been too young to maybe remember seeing 89, obviously, when it first came out or anything like that. Is there another one that sort of sticks out in nostalgia for you as well, that has a special moment in your childhood coming up?
So it's funny you ask. So because a lot of times what I love is the marketing. Like even like with the toys, I love just like the car, like the artwork they did for it. But
Mhm.
when it comes to like just like when I think of that question, like two first things that pop up is immediately I think that Batman Returns is definitely for sure like my probably my favorite movie. And if you like look through my page on Instagram, I try to do I like Batman in general across the board,
Yeah,
but for the most I think that like I can't help but like gush over Batman Returns for many reasons. But when it ultimately when it comes to the marketing, even though I was definitely a bit young for '89, I I cannot get over how genius the cover to the VHS of Batman '89 is.
yeah,
Um, like when you think about like when you look at it, it's I mean I don't know this, but it might even as far as I know, it's the only VHS that doesn't have any writing on it whatsoever. It's literally just a symbol.
yeah.
And for anybody who's too young to remember, back in those days, that symbol or like yeah, the symbol for the movie, it was kind of weird to look at first. It was almost like a optical illusion. Like people didn't quite see the bat symbol at
Mm,
first.
mm.
And I remember being a kid and like my family who knew I loved Batman would be like, "Oh, look at this," and they'd show me the cover of the Batman VHS, and I didn't quite understand what it was. I remember thinking like, is it like the inside of a mouth, and it's like the back is like like the tonsil. I don't know what I was looking at. Um, but yeah, but now obviously it's the iconic symbol that it is. So definitely that is definitely up there. But besides that, anything Batman Returns, I'm a big fan of.
I agree with you 100%. That symbol has just lived on so many years later. I remember as a child myself when that movie came out. I was 11 years old. The original first Tim Burton movie came out. I was 11 years old. I saw that in cinema. I've actually got a Polaroid photo of myself standing next to a replica of the Batmobile that they toured around the world
Nice.
as well. I'm pretty sure it was a replica. I don't think it was the original one, but they toured it around and it was at the local shopping center where I grew up.
Cool.
I've still got the Polaroid of me as a child standing next to the Batmobile, and they had that massive symbol in the background. It was like this thing that just stuck in your mind, and I remember drawing it. I remember learning to draw that when I was 11 years old, and just drawing it on my writing pads and on my school books and everything everywhere. I would just constantly practice drawing that symbol until I got it down pat and I could draw it. I could probably still do it now, even though I haven't done it in years. Like just off memory, probably doing it as well.
For sure, it's iconic. How can you forget?
Well, let's go to Batman Returns. Obviously, as you mentioned, that's one of the things that you gravitate towards. Ironically, or coincidentally, coincidentally, that's the word. I was trying to get the word there. Coincidentally,
You got it.
today, when I'm recording with you here in Australia, is the 19th of June, and that just happens
Wow.
today to be the 30th anniversary of the release of Batman Returns here in Australia. So later today, I'll be actually watching Batman Returns to honor that, and probably posting to my Instagram as well. Because that
Likewise.
that does have a really really solid place in nostalgia for me as well. I mean, both of those Tim Burton movies. Did you realize that Tim Burton had wanted to do a third movie, but Warner Brothers hadn't actually let him? They had steered him away because of the marketing. When you talk about the marketing,
Mm,
McDonald's was this massive force. You had these parental groups who didn't like the movie and things that were in it, and I can understand certain aspects of what they were saying. You've got a child gets thrown into a river, you've got a woman running around with a whip in latex. Like, I can
right.
understand some of the family groups where they were coming from, but I mean, it was still such a great movie. And I know McDonald's after that, I'd heard that they said, we are not going to approve any more campaigns unless we see the movie first. And then
Sure.
Warner Brothers steered Tim Burton away. Is there any sort of fun facts like that you have from the movies that you've been watching over the years, that whenever you're if you're at the pub with someone, you're like, did you know X, Y, and Z thing?
That is a great question. I was so transpired
I
by your
put you on the
story.
spot here.
So I don't know if I have necessarily a interesting tidbit about that. I mean, obviously, I remember that, like you said, Batman when Batman Returns came out, there was a big push in advertisement based on because of how great '89 did. So McDonald's obviously jumped on board, and then
Yeah.
obviously, like you said, there was big pushback from the parents. So McDonald's, like you said, put their foot down essentially. But I do know that obviously when Batman Forever came out, they changed the directors, like you said. But I remember Batman Forever, when they did their partnership with McDonald's, they came out with 4 glass mugs.
Yep.
It was the Batman, Two Face, Riddler, and Robin.
Correct.
And from what I understand, I believe that those cups sold out within a day. It was very quick how quickly those like mugs sold out. Um, uh, and it's funny you say that, or you
Yeah.
bring up McDonald's. In general, I love anything Batman McDonald's because when I was a kid, my dad worked at a McDonald's. He was a store manager, so I always had access to. I would always see the cups, and I would always see
The
the
Happy Meal
bags, and
toys.
I'd always get the yeah, absolutely, the toys. And I remember being lucky enough to where obviously when once the toys were done and they were switching up to something else, what do they do? What do they do with the toy display? Well, my dad just took it home and like I got to keep it. It was just in my room, and
Oh,
I
awesome.
loved it.
Do you still have
Yeah,
those? Do you still have some of those
unfortunately,
displays?
no.
Ah,
After I was young, so I would have it, and then my mom would eventually quietly throw it away, and I just wouldn't notice until years later, like whatever happened. I remember having all these things. So, but
Mum,
yeah,
a message to mums out there: don't throw away things without asking your child first, because you never know what's going to be worth something in the future. But also just for like the remember, like the nostalgia factor, being able to remember back to your father bringing something like that back to you. That's amazing. Like
absolutely.
that you had access to those things.
For sure. My parents gave me the best gifts and also took them away from me.
Parents giveth and they taketh. That's right.
They truly
And
do.
one of the things I've noticed, going back to your collection, a theming that comes up often on your page is that you collect watches and pins. Can you tell me a bit about your obsession behind them?
Sure. So, a little bit of my background. One of the things I've always done is I've always tended to have a hand in retail. I've for over a decade worked in a retail in some way, shape, or form, a little bit on and off. Mainly, like I worked at a clothing brand, and then I also worked at a fashion accessories kind of store. And so obviously through, doing all that, you kind of get a sense of fashion. You know, just a little bit of like, an understanding of how like things should look or like how to carry things. And the one thing that always bothered me was one, how I always feel like women have more diversity and more things to play with when it comes to fashion. And
Mm-hmm.
men tend to have, like a suit or a t-shirt or whatever, or a polo. It's
Yeah.
very a limited. But the other thing is when it comes to Batman fandom, the one like go-to that I feel like everybody always went to was the black t-shirt with the yellow logo. Again, iconic, it is Batman.
Yeah.
But for me in my mind, I always remember thinking like it's a little bit too easy. Um, and so for the longest time, I always loved interesting things or like kind of like or just like Batman. It's a Batman to the degree of like no, like I'm a real Batman fan. Do you know what I mean? So, for example, one of my favorite T-shirts is the Kenner Batman, um, the quick change Bruce Wayne,
Oh
which I
yeah.
just have behind me. So it's like the stripes and like the red bat signal kind of. I love it because most people just think of it as just a regular shirt. Doesn't look like anything Batman. Every now and then I'll get like somebody will kind of come up to me and be like, "Hey, where'd you get that shirt?" And I'm like, "Oh, you're in the know." But anyways, so back to your question. So after a while, I personally am not a big fan of t-shirts, so I always like polos or something with a collar or like a Henley or anything like that. So for me, it got a little tricky finding a way to show my Batman fandom. So after a while, I started thinking like I love my watches. I've got a lot of watches, and that's cool and all, but easy to miss sometimes. And then one day I just realized, look at all these like hundreds of pins that I own. Like, so after a while I started thinking, what makes a good parent? How can I carry this off? Like, and I've been to weddings and dates and whatnot, like carrying these watch pin, combinations. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of where it started. So after a while, it just came. This is kind of my way of like hopefully inspiring the fellow fandom. Think creatively. Here's other ways that we can look, professional or whatever, or adult or whatever. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that easy go to Batman T-shirt.
Yeah, no, I love that because it gives you an opportunity to, still, as you said, dress in a style that suits you, but also, you can accessorize and still have your fandom. And literally, when people talk about, wearing your heart on your sleeve, you obviously, Batman is in your heart and you literally wear him on your sleeve in the watch form.
Sure.
How many watches would you say that you have? Like at this point, I sort of guessed just by what I counted off your Instagram page that you might have been at least 16, but I think you may also be clever in the fact that you swap watch bands on some of these as well. Am I correct?
Yes, I definitely swatch the watch bands, especially if they're watches that I like to wear. I actually have, roughly estimating, I would say maybe about 50. I've got watches that I will wear, and I've got watches that are just in the box and I just like will not touch.
Wow,
So,
50.
and I'm sorry.
I said, wow,
What
50,
I,
right?
yeah, well, and so I part of it is an old like comic book mentality of where you always get two. You get one that you can actually like open up and like use or
Yeah.
whatever, and then the other one where you like pour, away forever. And
Yes, keep
so
the mint one.
absolutely. And like so when I if I find a deal, I'm gonna get it, especially if it's a watch that I already have, because if anything happens to one, because then I've got I've got a spare. If anybody wants to trade, I've got an extras. Like I got you.
Yeah. How do you find that, like, trying to locate some of these watches? I mean, when you talk about, like, some of your watches look like they are literally watches that would have come out in the 90s, that now Batman Returns 30 years later. So if you've got watches that are 25 plus years old, how do you find, like, trying to find doubles of those? Is that something that you seek out and you have like a regular eBay search or something that comes up for whenever new Batman watches come available?
So that's a good question. Ultimately, I essentially there's some watches that you always see come up, right? So there's like some I'm thinking of this one style that essentially it has a like it's a rubber band, um, and it's like black and it's got metal like little screws on it, and but the back will always maybe show something different. So it'll show like the classic yellow logo, like the
Yeah,
oval, or it might show it in a circle, or it might show it in the white for Batman Returns, or it
yeah,
might show it in the hologram, but you kind of always tend to see it pop up on eBay, especially. So I've got definitely got a few of those. It's definitely I think that I've gotten to a point where I've got enough of the spares of like the ones that they're always out. It's now I kind of keep there are certain watches that I kind of keep an eye out for that are just more rare and a little bit more pricier, and it's more I just kind of keep like my finger on the button of like, is this something that I need? Is this something? Those are the ones that I tend to have only one of, and they tend to be the older ones, like from the '60s, and
hmm
or if they're a little bit more pricier when they first came out. So, like I said, the rubber ones you'll find plenty of, but then there's some that have like a leather band on it. Currently, right now, I'm kind of keeping an eye out for a Catwoman one that had a leather strap and like like hologram claws, from what I remember, on the
Ah.
face. I've seen photographs of it. I know it exists. I just haven't found one that at the right price that I've been able to snag yet.
Would you say that's up there as far as a Grail item is concerned, or is there a specific Grail item like a watch that you're like, there's this one watch that I've seen that I've never been able to locate in person, or which has such a high price tag on it when I have seen it that I'm not sure I'll ever get that, but I would love that for my collection.
So I wouldn't call it a Grail item. I think that the issue was more. I think Batman Watch for Batman Returns, the Batman items sold more,
Hmm.
and Catwoman I think also sold, but I don't think that maybe they sold as many, and they the ones that were sold maybe weren't taken care of, so there's
Yeah.
less of them to be able to find nowadays. So I think it is hard to find. But for me, when it comes to watches, the Grail items, two come to mind. One came out during the Nolan trilogy. I'm not sure which movie it was, but essentially it looks like a watch from the 1920s. It's a square face, but what I love about it is it's you can slide the face and flip it over so that way the crystal of the face isn't exposed. So it protects the
Cool.
crystal, but when you turn it over and the metal is showing, it's the Logan bat symbol. And then when you flip it
Uh,
back over, it's just another like watch that you might see, at Tiffany's or whatever. So that one, from what I understand, is very rare. I almost want to say, and I could be making this up, but I almost want to say that there were only maybe like three made for it. It's very rare.
oh wow.
That I would say is a Grail item. And then the other one that I can think of is a old fossil watch that I've only ever seen from an old Batman Instagram page that is no longer active, unfortunately. And essentially, the face looks like, or is very reminiscent of the opening to the '89 Batman movie, where
Mhm.
where that stone bat emblem that you kind of the
Yep,
camera
yep. I
zips
know what
around
you're
them.
talking
That's
about. That's
essentially,
yeah.
yeah, that's essentially a watch, and it's beautiful. And I would
Wow.
love to get it one day. I think I saw it for sale once, but years ago. It was definitely above my price range. I want to say it was around $300, which is definitely more than I like to spend on watches. But it was up there, and a part of me like wonders if I should have gotten it, but I'm okay still looking.
Yeah, look, I mean, as collectors, we do have, things that we hunt and we chase, and sometimes we might push ourselves to the limit when it comes to our budgets for things. But I completely understand trying to stay within the realms of that as well. Not everyone has a lot of money to spend on their collections. I had a former guest on here who a Ghostbuster collector who has a Guinness World Record, but the majority of his items, he's never really spent in excess of about $15 on average
Wow.
on those pieces. But he's just been collecting for such a long time that even only spending those small amounts and just being lucky
Mhm.
enough to pick up certain things, from thrift stores or online, wherever, from other people he knew, he's managed to amass this massive collection. Would you have a bit of an idea of the size of your collection? I mean, 50 watches, like, and then all your other items, I noticed you've got some toys in the background, and you've obviously got your hats, and I've seen sunglasses that you've posted and all sorts of things as well.
So, okay, I was thinking about this, and I comfortably can say I have above 500 items.
Wow.
Um, hav- Having that said, similar to your Ghostbusters collector, a lot of it is just things that I found dirt cheap that nobody in their right mind would ever buy, and I was like, I'll take them. So I've got like over a couple hundred just single pencils, like just like wooden pencils that you would
Oh,
have had
yeah.
in elementary school. I've got trading cards, pins. So it's a lot of like little things for the most part. And then I find that when it comes to my collecting, I think the easier to store, the easier to display, the easier to keep hidden away, the more likely I am to buy it. If it's something kind of bigger, like statues, I tend to stay away from because like again, I
Space.
if I have this big ticket item that looks spectacular, just like museum item, I'm gonna want to display it. But if I get too many, how am I going to display all of them?
Hmm.
Are they just going to get stowed away? So that
Yeah.
I find a shame. So, but yeah,
Well, I mean, we can't all be lucky enough to have a bat cave in our home. When people do have these different fan caves in their home, I'm always blown away by the way they lay them out. But then also, you've got people who potentially don't have a lot of room. Maybe they're living in an apartment and sharing with people. Maybe they're. I've I've seen people who, you know, literally have their collections within the confines of a room. They've got hundreds of items like spread out. It looks like a stuffed retail display almost, like in some cases.
Right.
With your collection as well, I mean, 500 pieces is amazing. Is there an item that you, whenever you see it, obviously you mentioned statues and big items like that, is there an item that whenever you see it, you just have to have it? Like you can't help yourself whenever you see a certain item.
Um, so there's two things that come to mind. The first one is the one I always try to get and can never seem to snag. And that's actually the style guides for Batman Returns.
Okay.
Essentially, a style guide, for those who don't know, is when they do marketing, like on toys or coloring books or what have you, for like a movie. The people who create the merchandise get like a packet of paperwork showing the artwork that they're allowed to use for, the product. So
Mhm.
a lot of the repeat images that you'll see, they're all essentially given to them in a packet. They You do see them kind of pop up every now and then online and on eBay and whatnot. But again, it's a hot item, so it always tends to go a little bit higher than what I want to pay for it. But that's definitely one item that I can't help but just keep an eye on. And if I have to
Right.
like break my limit of how much I'm trying to spend, I'll try it. But then I always get outbid. The other thing that I can't help but try to snag if I see it isn't necessarily a specific thing, but it's more things that are so silly or that you never see, or that why would anybody have this.
Yeah.
I love things like that. So the one thing you brought up, which is fairly popular on my page, is I have a pair of Batman sunglasses, really cheap Batman sunglasses, like something that you would something that you would get like a promotional giveaway.
Yeah.
And on the side it says Batman Returns McDonald's.
Yeah.
And I love these sunglasses. And they come with like, the little the strap on the back. So when you take them off, you can just hang like a necklace. I love and adore these sunglasses. And they're definitely my go-to sunglasses this summer. Uh, but and it's such like a niche thing that I got for dirt cheap. And whenever I post, everybody loves it. Everybody's, say commenting like, "Oh my god, these glasses."
I agree. I actually like, it's one of the things that stood out like on your page that I saw them. I'm like, they're really cool. Do they make them in adult sizes? And you mentioned that you're going to be wearing them in summer, so they obviously do come in adult sizes, not
Yeah,
just kid sizes as well.
for sure. They're a little I feel they look a little snug on me, but I luckily can pull them off, so they're good. I've got a big head, but I make it work.
I might have to keep an eye out for a pair myself now. Actually,
For sure.
that's
But
really
again, it's
cool.
like those little things that you would never think would anybody would know existed. And like obviously whoever has them is like, look at this piece of junk. Let's just sell it for like, I don't know, $10 online. And I'm the guy searching for that.
Well, there's a lot
I'm
of
always looking
pieces
for a good.
on. Yeah, there's a lot of pieces on my collection as well, that you can see in the background. And what gets posted on my Instagram is a lot of the pop vinyl, because there's so many of them get released now, and they've got so many of the different pop vinyls that you can get in the different versions from the different movies, from different comic versions as well. But I also have these things that I've been collecting over the years, things like the trading cards that you mentioned, the Topps trading cards from the first couple of movies, and also the Batman Forever ones they had as well. They had
Mhm.
in Batman and Robin, they had, I don't remember collecting, I think I had some trading cards of those, but they were like a taller, longer style playing
Yep.
card from memory. I think they might have had them as a cinema release. And but there was one item that I used to collect, and I think they came in a, I want to say they came in a chip packet, but they're like little film cells as well.
Absolutely. I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
They were blue and like translucent. Like you could see
Yes.
through them kind of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. They
So
were from
I've still got
Doritos, I believe.
I've still got those stashed away. I do have those glasses that you mentioned as well. I do remember
Mhm.
buying them when they first came out at McDonald's in Australia.
Right.
The original ones that I had, I think I've got a couple of those, and I think a couple got broken over time, so I didn't have all four of them. So years ago, I saw on eBay someone selling. They actually had three full sets. They were selling like 12 of them in one go, and I ended up buying those for, I can't even remember how much it was. I don't. I want to say it was about $70 for the 12 glasses, and I was like, done.
Okay.
Like, I'll take it.
Yeah.
And so I bought those, and I've still got those. I've got one set that sits in the kitchen that I use, and
Right.
then the other couple of
The
sets
fine
are
china.
actually put aside, and I keep mint condition just in case I ever break one, and I can always take one out to replace it. So I love those
Right.
items. I love those, as you mentioned, things like the McDonald's items and those things from my childhood. Can't help but spend time looking at them and just adoring the artwork and the design that went into them. I don't think children these days will get the same kind of nostalgia of collecting some of those things.
Mhm.
But also, they also get blessed in a way that they have so much more variety now in the things that they can watch and that they can be fans of in terms of the different Batman universes, whether it be the games, the movies, the comics, the cartoons, all of that. Is there
Mhm.
something outside of the movies that you gravitate towards as well? The comic art, like that kind of thing?
Oh,
The classic comic art?
yeah, kind of. I think so. When it comes to comics, I I tend to look for I just kind of look for like comic covers that kind of speak to me or things that I'm kind of like falling back into. So again, kind of going back to the style guides that I was saying before, those style guides were drawn by an artist named Jose Luis Garcia Lopez.
Hmm.
He, if you don't recognize the name, Google image his artwork because you've definitely seen his artwork. From what I remember, I believe in the '80s, DC Comics had him do the style guides for all the DC heroes. Period.
Oh,
So a lot of the nostalgic like just like logos that you'll see, like just like I almost think of like what is it, the superpowers
yeah,
toys.
yeah. I know what
I
you're talking about.
want to say he drew the artwork for that, but he was just a comic book artist. So I've definitely been like digging, the bargain bins for anything with his cover on it. So things like that, or you said cartoons. Obviously, Batman the Animated Series, I'm a big fan of.
Hmm.
So I've definitely I have the I don't know if you know, but or you know what I'm talking about. But there's an animation book done by Chip Kidd, who or basically he just took essentially behind the scene pictures and put them all in a book, where you can kind of see like how the like the first drafts of how Batman the Animated Series was coming out and different aspects and like like photographs from back in the day of Kevin Conroy and all all the actresses and
So
actors.
it's like an art
Um,
of book, like one of those art of books that they do for
yeah,
movies.
sure. So, and that for me, the one that I own, I call my yearbook because what my goal is, I've been trying to find anybody associated with Batman the Animated Series, and I've been trying to get their autographs.
Oh,
So
that's
I've got
cool.
the voice of Poison Ivy. I've got the Riddler. Different people like that, and so I'm trying to fill as many signatures in this book as possible. So I I'm still working. I've still got a few kind of people who I'm kind of looking for. So I'm missing Catwoman. I met the voice of Terry McGinnis. I got his autograph, but unfortunately not in this book. So I definitely I'm looking for him again because
Okay.
one of the last pages of the book is I guess Chip Kidd essentially says like, oh, and here's a new idea that they're coming out with. Here's some early drafts with this thing called Batman Beyond. We'll see how that goes.
Cool.
So
It went
yeah,
pretty well.
for sure. So things like that I love.
Do you have Kevin
Yeah, I
Conroy?
don't know if I answered your. I'm sorry.
Do you have Kevin Conroy?
I do. I have him. I He signed that book, and I also had him sign my Blu-ray set, and
And what about
personal.
Mark Hamill?
No, he's the harder one, unfortunately. I haven't been able to track him down. I tend to stay local for my Comic Cons in general, so I don't go too far.
That's fair.
Yeah. So, but one day, hopefully, he'll come on the East Coast in the Virginia area, and I'll try my best to track him down.
Well, that'd be great because obviously, if you're going to have all the people from the animated series, you have to have that. Like Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill are definitely those grails as far as signatures go. having them, and their
Right.
voices are so iconic. What they've done after that in doing the Arkham games as well, just fantastic voice actors. And I think for anyone, if they think of Batman's voice in their head, they're going to picture Kevin Conroy.
Absolutely.
You're going to hear that voice. And I think whereas Joker, you may have different versions because of Heath Ledger and things like that. I also think Mark Hamill is, for anyone who's played those video games or watched the animated series, then you're going to hear Mark Hamill's voice in your head when you think of the Joker as well.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. If you kind of like, you kind of have to force yourself to think of Heath Ledger or force yourself to think of, Jared Leto. But if you just think of just the Joker and don't really think about it, Mark Hamill's laugh is essentially what you're thinking of, whether you realize it or
Yes.
not.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Look, Brian, you've been very gracious with your time here today, and we could speak for hours on Batman. Definitely. It's one of
Absolutely,
those
for
things that
sure.
I could just geek out forever on with people, and I'm sure I'll have other Batman collectors on the show. But you are officially the first Batman collector to be on the show, and so I do really appreciate your time. For people who want to actually find your collection, see some of the cool watches and things that you do have, where can they find you? Let them know your socials.
Sure. I'm mainly on Instagram as Gotham Street Shop. So if you are definitely interested in seeing any cool Batman items, definitely check me out. And if you have any questions, feel free to message me. I'm definitely down to talk Batman.
Yeah, so I definitely urge anyone who's a fan of Batman to go and check out that page, and have a look at the fantastic photos that you post up there, and the fantastic collection that you have. So thank you very much for your time. I look forward to seeing more of your collection and speaking to you again in the future. Cheers. If you liked the episode, please consider following or subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also join me on Instagram at Collecting Heroes, where you can see photos of the collections of the people that I'm talking to, as well as some of my own.